Can you hear me? You've gone.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, lower the rate on.
Lower the rate across all products. So
across all products.
Exemptions and create a lower flat rate of VAT. It's a much fairer way to gain revenue.
Okay. I think we're having the line started very good, but we were coming to the end, so I'm very grateful. Thank you for your time. Morgan Schondelmeyer is Director of Operations at the Adam Smith Institute. Listening to that, Duncan Weldon, economist and author. Reflect, if you would, initially, Duncan, on what we heard from the Governor of the Bank of England yesterday. How grim do you perceive it to be? Morning.
Good morning, Nick. I mean, yesterday, it was one of the grimmest Bank of England's announcements I can remember. You add it all together. They say inflation, that's price rises, are going to get above 10%, well ahead of wages. British living standards are going to take their biggest annual fall since modern records began in the 1960s, and that economic growth is going to slow very, very sharply till we're sort of bouncing around just in or very near a recession by the end of the year. So growth down, prices up, living standards hit. The grimmest Bank of England announcement in many a year.
What should my listeners be doing?
There's not much your listeners can do. That's the problem. There's not much the Bank of England can do. Lots.
We are having trouble with lines today. Duncan, can you hear me? Okay, let's move to some callers. Let's see if we can get him back. If not, but certainly we can't continue with that line. Okay, let's go straight to callers. Sorry, Duncan Weldon, if you can hear me, we can't hear you, so I must move on specifically to the aspect, because obviously these are experienced economists with whom we've been speaking, but as you went to put your cross in the box yesterday or last night, what was driving your particular vote? Dina in St John's Wood. What was it, Dina? Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
Hello.
What came to my mind when I went to cast my vote was Karen Buck, my local MP.
Oh, right.
She is a sincere, down-to-earth, decent, normal human being.
Right.
And she hasn't become sensational in any way. She's not in sound bites. She writes to us once a month explaining what's going on in the borough, what's going on in her constituency. She's interested in local matters, local people, both middle class and working class, international poverty, the war in Ukraine. And I thought, all these other problems, which are huge that we're facing, cannot be faced by people other than her. Steady. And that's what was uppermost in my mind, Nick. And I am totally shocked that Westminster has gone to Labour.
Presumably you are, Karen Buck is a Labour MP, so presumably you're glad with the news. Are you happy with the news, are you?
Well, yes, I am.
Right.
Because although Westminster is totally amazing, we have our bins emptied 3 times a week.
You what?
I don't mind suffering.
That's 3 times a year.
Pardon?
I've heard that's 3 times a year. But anyway, do go on.
No, we have it 3 times a week. So we are going to lose out by having Westminster go Labour because councillors are different to the MPs. But I still overall wanted to represent Karen Buck, actually.
Okay, well you have... Could I bring my rubbish round to yours, please? Because if you're getting cleared 3 times, you won't notice it. Can I just have the Wednesday? Can I just have the Wednesday pickup?
You do cheer me up.
Oh, well, there we go. Hopefully. Not everyone said that in my life. Dina, thank you for that, and thank you for background. Let's get a quick word. We've got Duncan Weldon, economist and author, back. We were just exploring, Duncan, what, if anything, can my listeners do faced with almost a perfect storm of pain? Duncan, again.
Yes, Nick, sorry I lost you there. I think Martin Lewis, from Money Saving Expert, he put it really well. He said, these are problems I can't deal with. I've been helping people, advising them on the best ways to save money, to manage their budgets for 20 odd years, but, there's not much I can do now. He said, the government has to step up to this, and I think that's right. That was really the message from the Bank of England yesterday as well. They can't do much about this with interest rates. We know we're going to have a really hellishly bad 12 months in terms of price rises, in terms of people's incomes being hit, after which it should start to recover. Really, it's now sort of incumbent on the government to step up to try and protect people by doing more.
How? What does it do?
Okay, the three things they could do that would actually help put money back in people's pockets this year, help the economy. The first one would be to increase universal credit, because that goes to people who are out of work and people who are in work but not earning very much. And those are the people feeling the worst of the squeeze, because they spend a higher proportion of their income on essentials like food and energy. The second thing you could do is look at a temporary boost in benefits such as pensions, because we know that, if you're on a state pension this year, your pension's gone up by about 3.5%, while prices are going up by 10%. To do with some more support to protect their incomes. And the final thing is some sort of broad-based temporary tax cut, whether that's cutting VAT, whether that's council tax rebates, whether that's a temporary cut in national insurance, just something that puts money back in the pockets of people quickly so they can get through this year.
Duncan World, an economist and author. His latest book, 200 Years of Muddling Through, the surprising story of Britain's economy from boom to bust and back again. Thank you for that. We'll come to more of your calls. John, you'll be the next call. Also coming up after the news, I think everyone accepts the doyen of political pollsters and analysts, John Curtis. We're hearing from him as he rakes over those results. It is 9:15 LBC News Headlines. Simon Conway.
The Conservatives have lost a number of key London councils to Labour, including Westminster, for the first time ever. Sir Keir Starmer's successes outside the capital have been less noticeable, though, following the local elections. Counting is beginning in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. LBC weather, some rain in the north, warm in the south and east with sunny spells, a high of 22 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. Long delays continue in London with the A1 being closed northbound all the way from Stirling Corner to the M25 junction. The investigation works are still taking place. Long delays in the area, especially through Bournemouth and Elstree, and also on the Barnet Road from Barnet Gate. On the M1, southbound in Bedfordshire, they're accused of about 2 miles. That was after an accident at junction 12 at Flitwick. All the lanes are open now, but it's still very slow. On the Surrey stretch of the M25, clockwise queues from junction 8 at Reigate to 9 at Leatherhead, and that was after an accident. In Greater Manchester, one lane's closed on the M60 clockwise at junction 18 at Simister Island, and that's because of the emergency repair works, and there are queues on the approach.
LBC.
Yeah, so we're going to need to increase your monthly mobile bill.
Again? Why?
Not really sure, to be honest.
Is there anything you can do?
No. No, can't do.
Relax. Here at Tesco Mobile, we won't take the biscuit, and we won't increase prices during your contract. This is Supermarket Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps. Tesco Mobile won't increase monthly subscription prices for pay monthly services during minimum contract period. See tescomobile.com/fixed-prices.
Call Nick Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973 LBC.
Hey, Harry. Hello, mate. Cancelled spin class. I'm sorry, pal. Sandra looks after the diary and she's out shopping. But listen, if you want to have a little spin, your best bet is to head over to the Bet Victor Casino and have a spin on them slots. Now listen, a little tip. Oh, hold up. I've got to run. The football's about to start.
Harry? Listen to Harry and make your best bet with Bet Victor. 18 plus. Aware. Responsibly.
It can be confusing when searching for dental implant solutions, but when choosing the right practice, small differences can have a huge impact. Here's Andrew Darwood from the Darwood & Tanner Dental Practice.
We never compromise on quality. Our meticulous approach to treatments and the use of the highest grade implant components offers exceptional longevity. Just ask one of our many happy patients.
Book your consultation today. Visit darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
Nick Ferrari Breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Let's pick up then. We'll come back to our conversation about the cost of living, your reactions to that. And remember, I'm asking you, as you went into the polling booth yesterday and your pencil hovered above the paper, or in my case, the 2 pieces of paper, what was it that drove you to put your vote where it did? Cost of living or scandals involving beer and curry or Prosecco and pizzas and whatever else it might be. More from you in a moment. But let's turn to, and I billed him before the news as the doyen of pollsters and analysts I speak of, Professor Sir John Curtis, polling expert, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde and Senior Research Fellow at the National Centre for Social Research.
Mate, right to the top, yeah.
High percentage and more often right than he's wrong, and he joins me now. Which party leader should have their head in their hands the most this morning, Sir John? Good morning.
I think the answer to that is Boris Johnson. It is the Conservatives who have suffered the most substantial reverse. illustrated obviously by the loss of the two iconic councils of Wandsworth and Westminster, but behind that, some voting figures that we've been collecting 4 points down on where the party was at 4 years ago, and perhaps even more importantly, 6 points down on where it was in the local elections last year. And I think, these local elections results do confirm the message of the polls that the Conservative Party has hit some at least rough electoral water, if not necessarily storm force conditions, for the first time since Boris Johnson won his majority back in December 2019.
A spectacular night in London, but Sir Keir Starmer, I doubt, is going to take the country if he can't break through in other areas, Sir John.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, London is now quite remarkable in the extent to which it's become a Labour city. I think the Conservatives will be left with just control of 4 boroughs of the 32 in the capital when all the ballots are in. Wandsworth and Westminster had long managed to repel the advancing Labour tide, even when the national climate was not in their favour. But finally they fell. And of course, the Conservatives were hoping that the low council tax pursued by both councils would still work. Actually, on the data we've been collecting, and this is perhaps something the Conservative Party might want to think about in future local election campaigns, there is no evidence in general that Conservative councils that had a lower council tax were any more successful in withstanding the electoral tide than those who had higher council taxes. But the truth is that beyond that, Sir Keir Starmer, once you go outside of London, and particularly when you go to the north of England, where, of course, Labour is wanting to reconnect with its so-called former Red Wall voters, Labour's vote there is quite clearly down on where it was back in 2018. And Labour spokesmen have been very, very keen to say we're making progress, and by implication saying we're now achieving heights that Jeremy Corbyn never managed. They're not quite there yet.
Shabina Mahmood, the Labour Party National Campaign Coordinator, told me earlier, Sir John, that if you take the aggregate vote share, it's worth 16 leave voting general election seats, places such as Copeland, Great Grimsby, Lee, Peterborough, West Bromwich East, and so on. Do you concur?
To be honest, I don't know, and I'll just let that stand. I will simply say that the Labour Party needs an awful lot more than 16 seats in order to win the next general election.
We're hearing rumours Worthing could go to the Labour Party. I think for the first time. Result expected sometime later today, mid-afternoon perhaps. How significant might that be?
Huge. Well, it's part of a general pattern. It's not so much that Labour are necessarily doing well in the south outside of London, but the Conservatives are particularly doing bad in the south outside London. They lost Southampton with as much as a 7-point swing. And I guess one of the reasons why perhaps these results might cause a little bit more worry amongst Tory MPs than the lack of major headline gains and losses are concerned is that the losses have been particularly heavy in the places where most Tory MPs have their constituencies, i.e. in the southern half of England.
So Ed Davey is understandably buoyed and buoyant this morning. Is he right so to be?
I think he's right. He's got right to have a smile on his face, but I would guess it's probably worth a bottle of Prosecco rather than a bottle of very expensive champagne. The Liberal vote is up by a couple of points as compared with 2018, and indeed as compared with last year. It actually isn't really that much better than 2019, so we can't say it's unprecedented. But unlike 2019, it doesn't have the advantage that facing a Conservative Party that was riven by the row over the Brexit negotiations that Theresa May was trying to conclude. So to that extent, at least, arguably these conditions were less propitious to Liberal Democrats, but they still made at least a modest advance. And in particular, we're doing especially well in wards where they were starting off in second place to the Conservatives. And of course, their chances of making progress in the next general election will rest very much on their ability to make progress in those so-called blue wall constituencies where the party is indeed already the principal challenge to the Conservatives locally.
Michael Portillo told me earlier, Sir John, that he senses the mood from Conservative MPs towards their leader would be change or be changed, so a greater degree of tolerance. Studying the figures, I wouldn't expect you to say something politically there, but studying the figures, would that seem to support it? They didn't do as badly as possibly they might have done. It certainly wasn't a good night, and it's enough to buy him another extension.
Well, I think the honest truth is that Mr. Johnson was always likely to benefit from exaggerated expectations about what these results might bring. There were all sorts of rather technical reasons as to why the Conservatives weren't going to lose a large number of councils. They weren't defending very many. Why they weren't going to lose that many seats, they weren't defending that many. Though actually, one should bear in mind, the Conservatives will still losing as many as 1 in 5 seats. But I suspect that Mr. Portillo is probably right, that it certainly is not going to result in any immediate reaction. But of course, there are other obstacles facing the Prime Minister, the possibility of further fines, the publication of the Sue Gray report, and now, of course, the reference to the committee on standards. So there's still plenty for the Prime Minister to have to deal with in the coming weeks and months before he can know that the Partygate scandal is behind him.
Always enjoy speaking with you. Thanks for your time, John. Professor Sir John Curtis, polling expert, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, Senior Research Fellow at the National Centre for Social Research. Let's pick up on our conversation concerning the cost of living crisis. I'll just try and get some of your emails in on that, but they all seem to be coming in on Baby Peter, which we have probably moved. So let's go on. John in Hart, what made you vote the way you, assuming you did, or what would have driven your vote? Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yes.
I didn't actually vote. We didn't have a local...
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know some places you didn't.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Now, last time we spoke, it was a day or following day after Russia invaded Ukraine, and I think that's got a major it's certainly a major contributor to recent events and the cost of living, despite the fact it was going to happen anyway. But my take on it is I just get fed up. I've listened to councillors from the opposition, and I've listened to politicians from the opposition, and they all blame the government for the cost of living. It's a global thing. I just can't understand how people can be so short-sighted, and that goes for a lot of the public.
What is the reality as you see it?
My personal view is, Russia's and Ukraine is, as I said, a major contributor. But,
right.
If the war was to come to an end tomorrow, the crisis is going to be there for a long time until Putin and co gets kicked out. It could go on for years. So, and unless we go green tomorrow, which is not the case, I think inflation is going to remain in the system. It's going to shock. And we've had zero interest rates there and thereabouts for the best part of 12 years or 14 years. And, the world is totally blind to the mistakes the global economy has made.
John, thank you. Some emails. I found them now. Tony, I've just returned from Australia. Motor fuel prices are 60% of UK prices. The average wage is higher than ours. UK citizens are being ripped off by oil companies and the government. People earning under 30,000 should have taxes cut now, and the government should tighten its own belt. Meanwhile, Philip says it's ironic people voting Conservative because of the lack of money in their pockets, but rejoicing Labour have taken the 2 cheapest London boroughs for council tax, also among some of the cheapest in the country. Mark in Edinburgh. Mark, what do you want to tell me? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. First of all, apologies for my articulation nervousness on the radio.
No, you'll be fantastic. Don't worry about it.
I just wanted to point out, really, that I think the current situation that we're sitting in the UK is that a lot of businesses, whilst we were robustly and swiftly dealt with things like bounce-back loans, etc., they're falling very short now. I mean, I was very lucky, had a very successful career as a commodities broker, and when I moved up with my family to Edinburgh, I wanted to create a business, and I went into something completely different. We install resin driveways and internal resins, and it's a small company.
What's internal resin? I know what a resin is. What's an internal resin? What does that mean?
It's like a metallic floor or
I see.
Made to look like marble. We are a very small company. We employ young people and people with experience, but we've got 5 members of staff. Now, one of the things that has hurt our company is actually taking the bounce back. Like we started the company in January, 2 months prior to lockdown, the first lockdown, and We obviously, you're finding your feet in the first year, and we had employees, etc. We took the bounce back loan because I was forking out money. I wasn't entitled to any grants. I didn't get rebates on premises that I was renting because they weren't on the rates roll, etc. So I took that, and that puts a bit of financial pressure. But what we're seeing now with the price rises, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of small businesses, we had this holiday period, if you like, for something in my industry where people were stuck at home and they did a lot of things to their home when we could get in them. But now that's not the case. And because of the high prices, one example of this is I had a guy who phoned me last week. His neighbour wants his driveway done to the same size.
Right.
The cost of that guy's driveway when we installed it about 16 months ago was in fact about $5,900, I think, from memory.
Right.
Now I'm VAT registered, etc., etc. The same size driveway today is £10,500 plus VAT. So you
Sorry,
can see
hang on. Why is it gone up by that huge amount? Explain that to me.
Well, the cost of material, I mean, resin itself has increased over 100%.
Right.
Large factors, raw material costs, etc., but and all the other normal issues like cargo in the wrong place. But we've seen some massive changes in the industry. But VAT for me now, I'm having to compete against guys that don't have a business premises. They say they know what they're doing, and they don't have to charge VAT, or they get around it by other means. But the VAT is a real factor. I mean, if I've got a driveway that's £10,000, which is very expensive for a lot of people's budgets, to then add another £2,000 onto that bill is really difficult for them.
Of course, because the VAT, unless of course they're in a position where it's a business or in some way they can make some kind of claim against it. Mark, good luck with the business you're running there. Thank you. We'll continue to ask you exactly what drove you to vote the way you did, as we keep a wary eye on their results as they come in. It's 9:30. You're listening to Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari, here on LBC. Let's get the news from Simon Conway.
Sir Keir Starmer says Labour's local election gains from the Conservatives have sent a message to Boris Johnson. The party has won control of 3 councils in London, Wandsworth, Westminster and Barnet. Labour's successes outside the capital have been more modest, though, and they lost control of Hull to the Liberal Democrats. The Tories are downplaying their losses, saying governments always struggle mid-term. Counting is now underway for the votes in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's understood Morrison's has put forward a deal to try to save the convenience store chain McColl's from collapse. The company, which employs around 16,000 people, has confirmed it could call in administrators. LBC weather: rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland, moving into Wales and Northern England. Warm in the south and east with some sunny spells, a high of 22 degrees.
LBC.
Join me, Andrew Castle, here on LBC. Women cannot feel safe in a place of work. They can't get ahead because some weirdos are on power trips. This is where we make laws. These are the people we're supposed to look up to. Oh, that's appalling. Join me, Andrew Castle, tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC.
At PensionBee, we're building a pension company you can believe in. Be pension confident. Join at pensionbee.com. Capital at risk, authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
If you're a gold buyer, you know you're safe with Gold Bank.
At Gold Bank, safe is in our DNA.
Feel safe in the knowledge that our unique fine scan technology ensures our highest authenticity in the gold we produce.
Feel safe that your gold comes certified with a unique identifying serial number.
And feel safe that Gold Bank's 30 years of experience means you can trust us in the recommendations we make.
Visit goldbank.co.uk.
Want a better broadband deal? Right now, TalkTalk have even faster speeds at the same great value. Get a super fast speed boost at no extra cost. Average speeds of 67 megabits per second for the same price as 38. Just £23.50 a month for 24 months. A super fast speed boost at no extra cost. Deals that make sense. Search TalkTalk Fibre. TalkTalk for everyone. Offer ends 25th May. CPI plus 3.7% annual increase from April 2023. Subject to availability. £9.95 postal packing. T's and C's apply.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Let's pick up on what made you vote the way you voted. Geraldine in Waltham Forest. What was it, Geraldine? Morning to you.
Hi, nice to speak with you.
Have you on?
Well, first the corruption, the billions of pounds in mates contracts, billions and billions, track and trace. How could that cost 37 billion. I thought the Tories were good at looking after money. They were obviously not.
Right.
And the absolutely dreadful deal, Brexit deal, that is basically stopping thousands and thousands, if not millions, of small companies trading in the EU. So obviously nobody's talking about this, but it's obviously sparkling the income.
So what you did, and you have every right so to do, is you actually punished the government at the local level for the way they've performed.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But you have to show your miscontent in the way you can't you?
Absolutely right.
That's all we've got. That's all we've got, because they've got another 2 years and they can do plenty more damage on this. I think they're basically fleecing the country. This Tory government is fleecing the country. That Tories are supposed to be good with money. They're not. And this illusion that they are, I don't know where this comes from, because obviously they're not. But this Brexit deal is costing the country a huge amount, and nobody's talking about it.
So in part, your vote last night, or sorry, yesterday, was your anger at the Boris Johnson for his Brexit deal.
Well, the damage that they're doing, and the money they've stolen, and the money they've stolen during the pandemic, and what we don't know about.
I absolutely get it. I'm just clarifying, and you have every right. You can vote for whatever you think, whether you like someone, whether you don't like them, whatever it is. It's just interesting to hear that some of the factors that were driving some of those votes. Geraldine, thank you for that. We will return to this. Now, if you were listening around this time last week, you'll know we did quite an extended item or conversation about the lack of police responding to certain calls, and one county came out particularly poorly, Kent. There were a series of calls, one of them you'll hear in a moment, about where the police simply had not done enough. In one instance, a call from a woman in Gravesend concerning a burglary which wasn't adequately followed up. Another call concerning an incident on the river Medway, and a poor response by Kent Police. Let's go to that one now. It was from Paul in Gillingham. He'd had a recent bad experience with Kent Police concerning that incident on the Medway in April.
I'm part of the Harbour Patrol that does some bylaw enforcement on behalf of the Statutory Harbour Authority locally. And a couple of weeks ago, a jet skier was breaking the bylaws and we approached him. He assaulted the crew and then threatened to stab them, and we called the police, and after 3 hours again, no one turned up.
Oh my God.
This whole thing, as you absolutely nail it, is not about lack of resources, it's about complete inefficiency. We have a Kent police force with helicopters, with £250,000 boats that aren't used. I've asked for freedom of information on those things and haven't had responses for 3 or 4 months. They have fleets of X5s, they attend events en masse and fail to turn out to protect the people that they're mandated to do. And we've had inflation busting council tax rises for years, and we have a failing police force and the complete inability to do anything about it. And as previous caller said, it goes right back to the Home Office, border controls and an ineffective police force.
We contacted Kent Police. District Commander for Medway, Chief Inspector Shona Lowndes, said in the incident reported on the River Medway, we were initially called at 3:05 p.m. on the 18th of April. It was alleged a person on a jet ski had made threats to assault staff patrolling a river safety boat. Kent Police established by 3:15 p.m, i.e. 10 minutes later. Contact between both parties had ended and no further threats were reported. Demand for higher priority calls meant officers were unable to immediately attend. The incident was investigated. We take all matters seriously. Following contact from LBC, we have spoken with Paul to discuss his concerns regarding our response to the incident and another of threats to stab. There was another call, actually there were 2 other calls. There was another call from a woman, as I mentioned, in Gravesend. Now, we've sought to get more details from her, and she's not been forthcoming, if you recall that call. And indeed, Kent Police say they've tried extensively to try and track down that particular incident in Gravesham, and they've failed as well. So if you are listening, we have been trying to ring you. If you give us more details, but we did ask you for everything possible at the time, and that's why we can't respond directly to that claim now, because we haven't got any more details, and Kent Police can't actually find that it happened. Hopefully that tidies that up. Should we come back to some other figures, which we looked at, I think, in the previous hour, but we've done a lot today, so it might have been 2 hours ago, I can't quite remember, which is the World Health Organization finally putting out figures concerning the rate of COVID. These are figures showing the number of excess deaths per 100,000 people across the world in 2020 and 2021, and why it would be wholly inappropriate to suggest in any way that you take something positive from it it's important, I think, for the United Kingdom to set the record straight, because many people were saying at the time that Boris Johnson had blood on his hands, that they were murdering people, they should have done more. Maybe they should have done more. And certainly Sir Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner and many others said that we were the worst in Europe. Far from it. And again, these are deaths of individual people, so it's a very grim subject, but it's important to put it straight. The figures of excess deaths per 100,000, the European average was 170. In the United Kingdom, it was 109. And many European countries, including Bulgaria, Poland, Italy, Germany, Spain, and others, were ahead of the UK. So, as I said when we first covered this, it was not a particularly glorious start, but maybe the UK did actually have a particularly spectacular catching up. I put some of this earlier in the show to the health commentator and former head of statistics at the ONS, National Office for National Statistics, Jamie Jenkins, to get his interpretation.
I remember quite early on in the pandemic, actually, Nick, Chris Whitty himself was saying that you kind of need to wait in the fullness of time to look at excess deaths and all-cause mortality. So the figures that have come out, and you're right to say that they're pretty grim figures. No countries really come out really well on this. But what this does, Nick, is when you're looking at COVID deaths and they're recorded quite differently by different countries, you do get some inconsistency. So you strip all of that out. And what the World Health Organization has done is